Hey everybody, before this episode starts, I would like you to be aware that there is explicit language, so viewer discretion is advised.
Being different is better than being better.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's Jeff Heilman Project. We have a special guest with us today. This is Jason Sullivan, and he's coming on today. You guys were new acquaintances, but it seems like we've all just hit it right out of the gate. And Jeff, would you like to explain and tell our audience a little bit about Jason before he introduces himself?
That's right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us today. And as we look at our histories of where we've been and where we work, there's a very special friend of mine, a guy named Dave Morris, that I've known for almost 20 years since we did a small startup company that was acquired by Cisco in 2004. And Dave Morris has become a coach and a mentor to me, and we played golf together, and I've had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with him multiple times. Went to a U.S. Open, actually, here in San Francisco at the O Club, I think 2012. Over 10 years ago now. But anyway, shout out to Dave Morris. And a few weeks ago, Dave had said, hey, I've got a friend of mine who just published a book, and he would be a great guest for your podcast, and, you should chat. And so last week we talked at length.
You guys talked for like 2 hours.
We were on the phone. Yeah, it was a pretty impressive, pretty intense first date with Jason. And then we made room in the schedule to make sure and get him on the podcast. So I want him to be able to talk about his book. I want him to talk about really an exceptional and interesting sales career, being that most salespeople today are not straight commission. So it's kind of a big deal. So Jason Sullivan, welcome to the Jeff Heilman Project. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you've been and what you're up to?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Jess. I appreciate the warm welcome. And I probably should say in advance that to the listeners, this is my first time I've ever been on a podcast. I think on the air, if you will. So if I'm nervous or I have any jitters, I just want to say apologies in advance. This is my very first time.
That's
so
great.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, welcome.
Glad to have you. It's just
Thank
about
you,
our
thank
first
you.
time too, except we've done about 30 episodes, but it still feels like the first time every time for us too, because this is something we started this year. So you're among friends, Jason.
Shout out to Dave Morris for bringing us together, and what a wonderful 2-hour first date that was on the phone. Yes, and I appreciate it. And it gave me a little extra motivation, if you will. I started off out of college after Dave. I went into law enforcement, and which even makes it even more strange to go into a sales career, because generally speaking, those two occupations don't go very well together. I did 10 years as a probation officer. I got my master's degree, and I was on my way into the DEA. I started playing in a national kind of public safety football league, semi-pro, if you will. I ended up with a really, really strange injury, a partially paralyzed left foot. Bizarre turn of events. I went to the doctor, had emergency surgery. I came out. He said, hey, Jay, I made a mistake. I don't know what I did, but you're going to need to sue me. And don't worry, I have insurance. And I got an attorney. We went through arbitration because it was an HMO. It was Kaiser. And I ended up losing after going through arbitration. And essentially what happened was the attorneys all got together and they battled it out. And the judge, the arbitrator, said, hey, Jay, I know that the doctor admitted making a mistake. We just don't know what he did. And something did go wrong, but it appears to be just a freak accident. And we can't award a med mal case on an accident, a freak, just a statistical anomaly. And we're really sorry. And that was it. So that threw my entire career. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was 32 years old. And the next thing you knew, I was without a job. I was on catastrophic leave. I had a partially paralyzed left foot. The doctor reached out to me. He said, I'm sorry. I'm going to have Kaiser pay for you to go to the foremost surgeon in San Diego. We're going to do a muscle transplant from your opposite thigh down to your left calf. And we're going to pay for it. And while all that was happening, that surgery took place. And then while my mother was about to fly out to see me post-surgery on the tarmac, the second tower fell on 9/11, and she was rerouted. And I woke up in ICU. She wasn't there. And long story short, or just a little bit longer, thanks for bearing with me, I ended up meeting my wife out of the deal. So something great came out of this. I didn't get anything. I didn't get the use of my left foot fully functional again. But what ended up happening is it pushed me into sales. I was living with my college fraternity brother at the time. And he came home one day, he said, "You want to go to a party in Laguna Beach?" I had nothing else to do. I was on crutches. I went up there. It was one of those nights where everything I was saying seemed to be the right thing at the right time. And I guess I impressed his boss and his boss's boss, who was hosting the party. I wanted nothing to do with being a salesman. It was the last damn thing in my mind. I thought it was a bullshit career. I thought everybody was full of shit, and I thought, I don't want to do this. And the next morning, he gets a call and they said, would Jason be interested in working with us? And I didn't know when I was there the whole night that was even an option, right? I was going to go back and get my teaching credential and coach football. So a few months later, I'm in the process and I start working as a box salesman, selling packaging. And let me tell you, I went into it very half-heartedly. I was still very depressed because my dream job had been taken away. I was handicapped. And I started plugging along, and I really just was kind of dejected. And at about the 2-year mark, right as I was about to call it in and say, hell no, I got a phone call and I had an opportunity to go make a sales presentation to Calloway Golf, and they bit, and I got my very first 6-figure purchase order. And it completely lifted my spirits because I actually saw the success of the fruits of the labor. And it's really interesting because my boss at the time knew I was half-assing it. And he pulled me aside and he said, "I know it's asking a lot, but if you can give everything I know you can, doors will start to open." And I did, and true to his word, I think success begets success. Maybe you'd agree with that, right?
Sure.
Things started to happen. And I had a little bit more spring in my step and some of that confidence. And, I'm a big proponent, and I talk about it in the book, that, people can hear the energy in your voice. If the good things happen, people can hear that in our voices. If it's on a phone call, if it's in person, there's the aura of the positivity, right? And conversely, if you're having a bad day or things are going wrong, they can hear the negative and they can see the negative about you, right? So things started happening, and for several years, it rolled and it rolled down the mountain. And then I had about a 10-year, really, really smashingly successful sales career, made more money than I ever thought possible. And then I got lazy, and then I got complacent, and then it went away, and it started to go away at the wrong time. And after 17 years in that company, I had to leave. And when I said goodbye to the owner, he said, "Jason, I can count." He'd been the owner for 55 years. And he said, "I can count on one hand the amount of guys who've been as successful as you, who've had that many years and who've had to leave." And he said, "I know if you're telling me goodbye, it's for good reason." And I ended up going to work for a couple other companies, and there's been a few job bounces since COVID. And it's been concerning. And this is how I came to the book, because I'm 54 years old. I know I look, a little bit older, but I'm a spry 54. And I started to ask myself, what am I going to do? I'm really, really technically challenged. I'm shitty on the computer. I mean, I don't hardly know Excel. I don't know all the word programs very well. I can type very fast. I can type well. I can read well, but I don't work on the computer well. And to get into sales leadership now, what you're finding, to get at an elevated, leadership role, they want you to be really computer savvy and computer tech. So I started to panic, and I said, my skills have always been soft skills, right? I'm a people person. I roll up my sleeves. I get out. I make the presentation. I meet people. I go out to lunch. I tell them what we can do. I'm the one who stands behind the product or the service. I'm the one who sees it through. What am I going to do? Because we're only getting more and more rapidly technological, right? And so I wrote the book on the importance and the criticalness of soft skills. It took me, give you an example, and I noted in the book, it's kind of funny. RSC, which you would probably never know, stands for regular slotted container. It's the good old-fashioned brown box that has 4 flaps, right, guys? You've opened up thousands of them your whole life.
Right.
Well, I sold boxes for 20 years, and I never knew what RSC stood for my first 7 years. And my boss said, Jesus Christ, Sullivan, I can't believe you don't understand what RSC stands for. You've been selling boxes for 7 years. And that's a segue into my book to say, because I never took the technical knowledge of packaging. I never needed it. I never needed it because people wanted me to be the point of contact. They wanted to buy because of me, because of my interpersonal skills, because my word, my trustworthiness, my ability to develop a relationship quickly. Right?
Yeah, the way that you make people feel.
To do with the 2-hour phone call.
That's gonna
on our first date.
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with how you make people feel, right? And if you make people feel good, then they're going to listen to what you have to say. And if what you have to say actually solves a problem, right? I talk about this seemingly till I'm blue in the face. That if you are talking about yourself and it's in the first half of a phone call, it's a fail, right? We should be doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the problem statement, right? With regard to your Calloway. And if we were to go and take apart that Calloway win that you had, that first $100,000 win, chances are the discussion that you had was about fulfillment and packaging and branding and what it represented to the company to be able to depend on a container provider such as yourself, and how you mitigated risk, and how you increased brand awareness, and how you would handle printing, and how you would handle sizing, and how you would handle shipping and packaging and inventory management of boxes, and everything about their business.
You don't kick my butt for this, Jeff, but you just teed me up perfectly. That first call with Calloway was not that. Now, what you just said, I do have in my book, and really, here's the drum roll for anyone who's listening, who's a salesperson. If you can identify the pain point or the problem for anyone that you're talking to sell any good or service, that is the goal. That's the goal. And if you have a solution for that pain point or problem, you are there. And I talk about that in the book.
And it's, you know, what's amazing is it almost doesn't even matter if you have a solution to that product, for that problem or not, because you're going to go pretty far down the sales path with that customer, and they're going to start to want to convince themselves to be like, God, you know, I know this guy sells life insurance, but I wish he sold refrigerators because I really need a refrigerator, but I'd buy it from him if I could, because this guy talked about what it's like to be part of a family and having food that's, you know, right?
Like, and you're exactly right. When I called Calloway, I was so nervous. I was shaking. And this guy answers the phone, and he sounded like an absolute grizzly bear. I mean, on a scale of what, 0 to Clint Eastwood, he was intimidating. And when he picked up the phone, it was, hello. And I was like, oh, no. And it's a complete cold call. And I started on my script, and I stopped after I said, hi, this is Jason Sullivan. I'm calling you from such and such packaging company. And I stopped, and he was quiet. And I said, Darren, listen, I know who you're getting your packaging from. And I said, I know you know who my company is. And I also know you know that if I quote your packaging, we're all going to be within 5 to 10% of each other. I said, what are the chances you would meet me for a beer this Friday after work for 30 minutes? I'll buy on your way home. I promise it'll be cold. You'll have a few laughs. And at the very least, it'll be a stopover and a break from traffic. I said, because we both know this much. If you don't like me, you're not buying shit from me. Okay?
That's right.
If I'm going to be a vendor that, you know, you don't want to pick up the phone, or I'm going to be a pain in the ass, or we don't gel, you're not going to buy anything. And he paused. And I mean, it was 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It felt like an hour. And you know that, you know this feeling.
That's right.
And he didn't say anything in his deep voice. And he said, we can do that.
We can do it. Yeah.
And I went, I mean, I was looking offset to my boss, who was off over to the left.
Yeah, camera
and I was
right.
doing this, right?
Camera
Pumping
left.
my fist, going, yeah. So we went out and had a beer.
Yeah.
I held on to Calloway for almost 15 years.
Oh my God. Can you give us, I mean, you don't have to, but I'd love to know. Can you tell us like how many boxes you sold or how much dollars you did with them over 15 years?
I can tell you that I sold millions. Every poly bag that Calloway and TaylorMade Golf in the world for 13 years. Wow. Probably 40 million to 75 million poly bags. Boxes, I probably sold half that. Foam sets, probably about half that.
Wow.
Absolutely, just unbelievable.
So, folks, if you've ever wondered about the boxes that get recycled at the end of your trip to the golf retailer of your neighborhood, what happens to those boxes and where do they come from? They come from Jason Sullivan.
That's right.
If we can, let's mention that the title of the book is called Feather Sharpens Iron.
I love that.
And it would appear after listening to you and your story that this is almost a metaphor for the iron being the police officer on his road to being a DEA, and then that feather of those soft skills in which you're talking about coming into play and then softening your hard-edged self. And my question to you is, was that a very difficult, like we have a lot of listeners and watchers who go through this transition period of they're going from either young adult to adult, they're going from, sales to, or engineering into sales, they're going from working for someone else into becoming a business owner and entrepreneur. How was that identity transformation from the hard-edged persona whom you were in the beginning? How did that transition go for you? What got you through to the master of soft skills whom you are today?
I'll tell you, and that's a really good question. I'll tell you what was interesting. I was in the wrong career path in law enforcement. I remember my mother telling me not to do it because that's not the kind of boy she raised and didn't think I was that kind of person. And interestingly, she said the same thing when I went into the sales role. She wanted me to be a teacher. And truth be told, if you were to say what was the career probably for me, teacher was the job. And I've done that job and I love that job. And I teach currently sales training. That was the job. I went into law enforcement because it was a job I fell in my senior year at San Diego State working at juvenile hall, which was really interesting because they ended up hiring me after my student internship. And I went right to work in the maximum security unit. Which had at the time 45 detainees, and I think 20 of them were in for murder. I think we had 10 for rape, and the rest were all in for aggravated robbery. These were 13 to 18-year-olds at the time.
Wow.
And I was 21, mind you. So you get an 18-year-old in, and I'm 21, and they're physically developed hardcore gang members. It was an intimidating situation, and it was very eye-opening, and I was shocked, to put it kindly, mildly. But it was very interesting. And while I was I went to graduate school and I thought the DEA would be interesting. And then really it was probably me almost pretending it was something I think I would have been good at, but it wasn't my calling, for lack of a word. But I did get a little harder, as that job can make you do, because I went after 5 years in juvenile. I went 5 years with adult, and I did some pretty serious cases with some bad guys. And you're around such negativity. I had always had a sincere like for people and curiosity to meet people, to engage and listen to their stories. I thought everybody had an interesting story. I think you can tell I'm excitable. I'm passionate. I just like people, and I'm engaging, and I don't like to let people down. Those traits seem to be a good combination for a salesperson, right? And the guys who met me at the party said, you make friends really easily. We watched you in the wild, and you had no idea we were interested in you as a salesman. But having seen what we've seen, we think you'd be pretty damn successful. And I took that chance. But, the whole thing was, and I got to point this out because I know you'll find this interesting. The original title of the book was going to be Powerfully Soft. And I switched it because when I had my leg injury, the lawsuit, part of the component was I was to go see a psychiatrist in San Diego. And little did I know at the time that I was sent to like one of the most famous psychiatrists in California, the West Coast, and very well known worldwide. I did not know this at the time. We had 8 sessions for the emotional damage component to my case. And after seeing him, it was a phenomenal experience for me. I thought he was fantastic. We stayed in touch for decades, and we're still in touch. He's 89 years old. And I had run the title of the book Powerfully Soft by him, and he said, no. We have a masculinity thing going on out in society right now. Be careful with that title. You may scare off some men because they may not give you a chance, right? So he guided me, and then I came up with the Feather Sharpens Iron, and I thought, and I talk about it, the irony in the book. I say it's okay. If you want to be harder, you do that by being powerfully soft. And that's one of the sentences, one of the statements I make.
Powerfully soft goes from the title to the catchphrase.
Correct.
Nice.
Correct. And I bring that in there because it's all those soft skills. And the cool thing is, Jess, is that soft skills, and you guys know this, They crossed over. It doesn't matter if you're a salesperson, a teacher, an engineer. We all need them. We all use them. And some of us just have a better command than others.
Hey everybody, this is Jessica. I'm so excited to offer to you this new service and this ability that you have to text in your questions, comments. Maybe you have some situations that you'd love for Jeff and Jessica to try to tackle along with you. You can text us now at 203-646-1472. Your phone carrier may have standard rates that apply, it being a text, but this is a free service from us to you in which we would like to participate with you in an ongoing conversation about how we can help and what we can possibly do for you. Looking forward to hearing from you soon.
So if you look at the big data, and I know you were talking about computers, but if you look at all big data says is that if you make dinner, Jessica cooks 3 meals a day, right? And I could ask her anything about any meal because she's done it, and she would have a response like that because she's just done so many different types of meals. Done it when she's tired. She's done meals for large parties, small parties, quick grilled cheese sandwich, for a kid that's hungry and didn't get lunch or just woke up from a nap. But the big data around that would be she's great at meal prep and cooking and ideas and creativity. If you take that big data, the amalgamation of years of being around people in very difficult situations, who have come from difficult situations, who have attitudes or whatever, kind of a two-part question. One is, what did you learn about people? Let's start with that. What did you learn about people from being in law enforcement as a probation officer for juveniles and for adults?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing I learned is I think there's more crooks in the business world than there were in the probation and the actual criminal convict world.
Tell me what you mean by that.
A lot of times criminals, when they get caught, they admit it. They don't run from it, especially career criminals. They fess up to it. They understand they've been caught. They understand the score. It's part of the game, right? What you see is what you get. And it's a game that's played, cops and robbers, and they play it. And when they're caught, they admit it and they go. So what I mean by that is you go into the business world, and I've done most of my work in China, international business. I've done a lot in Mexico. And China and Mexico, they have the reputation, at least culturally in business, that they're disingenuous, they're insincere, they're full of shit, right? And what you end up happening, if you can step back and really assess your own culture, is we're not any different here. The bribes, the lies, the pay to play is as prevalent here as it is in any of those other countries. I witnessed it firsthand. It was very dejecting. And I'm no
Mother Teresa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm no Mother Teresa, but I can tell you, I tried one time halfway through my packaging career to ask someone I had a really good relationship with if I could share my commissions with him for more business. And I'll never forget this because we were at his daughter's 1-year birthday party. We're still friends. And he looked at me and he said, "I can't believe you asked me that, and don't ever do that again." And he scolded me. And I was really shocked because he was so off put. At the very least, I thought when I asked, he'd just say, "No, I'm not interested," or he'd bite, one or the other.
Sure.
Now, I did that because I'd been coached by numerous people in my career to go for it. And
that's how it's done.
I've been on the job for a long time. And he slapped me down. I went through my 17 years in that job, and I never had to pay to play. Now, I can tell you, I am extremely proud of that. And anybody listening who would have known that company would say he's either full of shit or he's some, Mother Teresa.
Right.
That wasn't the case. I came from law enforcement. I would have colored outside the lines to better my pockets and certainly shared my commissions.
Sure.
Right. But
as a salesperson, but not as a police officer. I want to make sure we're clear on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not when I was in law enforcement. No, but I was scared and I didn't think it happened. I was naive. Does that make sense? I was naive.
Yeah. And I think that what you're talking about is part of what we're trying to do here with the podcast, which is not some Pollyanna example that is free from the reality that some people break bad and that's just the way it is, or sometimes there's compromising circumstances that make it easy for people to say, hey, other people are looking the other way. We can get an advantage out of this, and then nobody gets hurt, right? And if nobody gets hurt and nobody gets caught, then why wouldn't we think about it? But if we think about the theme for this podcast, which has been, it's been a work in progress for us to try to say, how do you take 7 kids, an entrepreneurial career, a husband and wife relationship where we do the podcast together. Jessica's not only the producer, but she's a co-host, and she helps with all the setup, and she's just as much a part of this as I am. And Andrew's just as much a part too. Like that's the 3 of us, the trifecta. What is this really about? And the podcast seems to be about a relationship with the audience where we can offer ideas, thoughts, philosophy, art, an appreciation for culture, an appreciation for food, an appreciation for best practices, an appreciation for aesthetics to the hard and fast lines of the Excel sheet in your accounting operations or back office of business, right? Because accounting is the language of business. Accounting leverages ledgers, whether those are on paper or in Excel, and it can be kind of a dry, very left brain, cerebral approach to living. And yet, if you can't count the numbers, you can't stay in business. So you have to have the hard lines, the edginess, the timelines, the project management, the Gantt charts, the burn down charts, all of the stuff for building and developing software, whatever your product is for bringing it to the market. However, we're still human beings that are doing this science stuff in the area of business. And we are not all science people. We are not just left brain robot organisms that operate autonomously from the humanities of the things mentioned earlier. And so I love the concept of feather sharpens iron. Can you talk a little bit more about how did your understanding and kind of your awakening in that, hey, some people break bad more than others, and sometimes they do it more often. But I can still hold the line. I can tote the company line and do what's right for my business and our boss and margins. I can also provide great service to people, and we can make a living and not get every sale closed, but a lot of them closed. But then as you come out of that and you recognize, okay, kind of second part of the question, and then leading into getting back to the book, what can you tell us about the commonalities that you saw? Again, metadata, not any one person, but in thousands of cases. What can you tell us about the things that you see common in the criminal world or in the justice system or correctional systems? What are the commonalities there, part A? And then what can you tell us about the winners that you've seen that either have or don't have some aspect of those things, but might have other aspects to them?
Well, I want to just back up before I answer that. I may need a clarifier there from you on that. First of all, the first question you asked me, I had never been asked that question before. So as I was kind of rambling and telling it to you, and then you were talking, I had a light bulb go off.
Please.
Thought, let me shorten that answer to this. When I was in law enforcement, I saw the lowest forms of human behavior accepted. And when I got into the business world, I saw the lowest forms of character accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's kind of the way I need to, I guess, encapsulate that. And, obviously
Amazing.
The criminals, they committed crimes and they learned to accept it and live with it. And in the business world, I don't even want to say more because I don't want to judge, but
it's the actual character of the people.
Yeah. The willingness to not give a shit about anyone or anything, but how many dollars they could make.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And what the absolute bottom line profit was, and the zigs and zags and the games to play. Right. At the expense of anything and everything. And it was so easily, it's amazing what we as people can get used to and comfortable with and excuse.
Sure.
Right. And excuse.
Yeah.
And that was the main difference.
You mentioned one thing before we go into the difference between winners and losers. I want to double click on one of the things you said about that the guys that get caught, they just know that it's part of the game. It's part of the equation. They admit their fault and, they got sloppy or whatever. And I would imagine they probably don't feel that guilty about the stuff that they did because it's the only reason they're in jail is because they got caught, right?
That's right.
They would have done it anyway.
Well, and they've also accepted jail is their natural state. So being out of jail is
They got lucky
foreign,
to get out.
and getting back into jail is where they belong.
Yeah.
I would
Interesting.
assume.
And you made a good point. If you saw Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite films, you saw the part when Brooks is going to get out and he ends up hanging himself because he can't adjust the outside world. Now that's taken to an extreme. You have a lifer there, right? But that lifer mentality applies to someone who's been socialized in the system at 12 years old. When I brought in kids, booked them in at 12, taught them how to shave at 13 and 14 when they came back. Saw them again when they were 16, had just gotten a driver's license, maybe not, then saw them again at 18 before they were going to California Youth Authority. They are so comfortable, as I had said earlier, it's amazing what people can get comfortable and accustomed to, right? They take that chance. They're however you want to, wherever you fall philosophically, the risk for them is worth the return, knowing that the consequences is being locked up.
Yeah.
So then let's pivot for a second to what do you see as commonalities between, if you could make a blanket statement and say, the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule says that 80% of the convicts or more all have XYZ traits in common.
Right.
Any thoughts on that? And if you don't, that's okay. You can decline. This is not a multiple choice test, right? You could say whatever you want. This
is great. These are questions that got me thinking on my feet, and I appreciate it. It's been a long time since I've talked law enforcement stuff, and obviously it never gets old.
Did we mention we're broadcasting to 3.2 million people right now? No, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding.
I would have froze up like I don't know if it was Marsha or Jan Brady with the red light on the Brady Bunch. If you ever saw that episode,
on air.
I would have just froze. I would say there's a certain level of fearlessness, the commonality, right? They have to throw caution to the wind because they're going to be treated. Once you get booked into the system, it's very difficult to get out. It is very difficult. And the juvenile justice system is an absolute spaghetti bowl nightmare to deal and tangle and untangle, because the system, as you would want, at least I would think most of your listeners would want, is to try to go really above and beyond for a juvenile, to try to keep them and divert them from becoming a career criminal, right? It's in that it's difficult because we have most of the repeat offenders in juvenile in the system come from the inner cities. They come from the broken homes. I mean, you've seen it. It's nothing that any of us don't know who don't come from that. It's the same story. And I think you guys are very well aware, and I'm a believer, and I can speak to it, the criticalness of a family to have the structure and the love and support, right?
Would you think that they would be receptive if you were to come and take some of your soft skills training into the juvenile hall? Would they be receptive to learning about soft skills themselves?
They might. I actually was a substitute teacher at juvenile hall for a year. I went and got my emergency teaching credential. When on my off shifts, I would go put on my shirt and tie and go teach. But I'll tell you an interesting story. Am I allowed to use profanity? Because it's important.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So when I worked in juvenile hall and you would have the detainees come out, and they'd come out into the day room, the common room, we would run showers, chow, and stuff like that. And it was all done unit by unit. You could tell somebody, you could say, hey, let's pretend the detainee's name was Heilman. You'd say, hey, Heilman, take it up to your room, which would mean get up from your table and go up to your room, right? And you would say that as a staff, as an officer, and they wouldn't move. Say, hey, Heilman, get to your room. And they'd sit there. Now, if I changed that sentence and added one word, 2 words, or a few words, a phrase, I should say. If I said, hey, Heilman, get up the fuck to your room. Get to your fucking room. They'd get up and go. They were so used to being talked to negatively, aggressively, with profanity, that it's almost that they didn't speak the language of being professional and just being considerate, respectful, right? If I said, Mr. Heilman, go to your room, they'd sit there blank. If I said, Heilman, get up and head to your fucking room, they'd go.
Wow.
It was amazing to me. Amazing.
Wow. So the conditioning and the environment that they're in obviously it's tough for you to parachute in as a substitute teacher for an hour or a day and make meaningful change when the environment's continually reiterating this is how it is and this is how you're going to behave.
That's it. And when I taught, because you were teaching to the lowest of the low on the intellectual scale, right? I'd say we'd do a math lesson. It was addition, subtraction. And I would say, you have 2 40 ounces of Old English and you're walking down the street to a party with your friends and you drop one, right? what do you have left? Right?
Less weight to outrun the cops.
Exactly. And I would make up and I would have fun. And the kids knew me from when I worked in the unit, right? As a probation officer. And they'd say, Mr. Sullivan, what are you doing here, man? And I'd say, I'm trying to make some extra money and teach you guys a few things with a different look. Right. And I would try to make the best of it, but it was very sad. And booking kids on Christmas Eve, my very first year, bringing in a kid, I booked him in and he started, when I was patting him down in the holding room, make sure he didn't have anything. He was 13. He just broke down crying, saying, I want to be home. I want to be home. I miss my family. And I don't know what he was picked up for. It was low grade, but he was so sad. It was my very first time I booked someone in that I got welled up. And when I turned around, my training officer was behind me. I'll never forget. His name was Dave Giles. He was 6'6" and felt like he was 7'4". And he was this towering presence who'd been around for decades. And he looked at me and he could see that there was water in my eyes. And I'll never forget, I thought he was going to fuck with me and say, what, you need to be a little tougher, right? And he looked at me and he said, it never gets any easier.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it stunned me because I didn't expect it, right?
Yeah.
And that was my beginning into booking in 13, 14-year-olds from the police, taking them in from the cops on Christmas Eve or Easter Sunday or New Year's Eve and all the other things you see alike. But, you get through and you deal with those people, and the soft skills were always there for me, right? It was all dealing with people to be respectful and kind and curious to listen, right? It can make you crazy when you deal with negative people to that extent where when you want to hurt them, it can make you that crazy, right?
So can you define, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you define, because we keep using the word soft skills in business, can you define maybe what that means? What is a soft skill in business?
So soft skills are those skills that we call interpersonal relationship. They could be, there's a variety, communication, listening, networking. Any of the hard skills are more of the technical skills that are learned. Those would be data entry. That would be your engineer. That would be your plumber, your electrician, your soundboard mixer. And the soft skills are all the other things that can be learned, but that things that were basically raised in interpersonal communication type of things. All the things that aren't the hard technical skills. So you can go get a Harvard engineer or a Harvard scientist, and then you can go get an MIT scientist to replace that Harvard one and a Yale to replace that person all day long. But the one that has the soft skills, the ability to communicate, to have the emotional intelligence, to have all of the things that we talk about, we take for granted, active listening, right? Could be creativity is probably one of the biggest ones that's talked about these days, and the creativity for problem solving. I use creativity in my book because what I do is I break down each chapter as a different soft skill. And I think I pick 12 of them in the book if I'm going from memory. And I use some practical applications at the end of each chapter on how you can improve this particular soft skill, right? And creativity in my chapter is about thinking creatively, talking, doing, saying, writing something different, right?
Yeah.
When you
so
hear
let's double down on that right now. So one of the huge books that's out there, and we want to talk about your book as well. One of the huge books that's out there right now that is getting a lot of press and seeing a lot of podcasts coming from it is Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, right? I mean, he's on every channel he's on with Huberman, he's on with our guy from England. I'm blanking on his name right now. Yeah, Shetty, Jay Shetty. And it's all about a state of mind. The creative act is about creating an environment and a state of mind in which the production of stuff is a pretty natural outpouring of being in that situation. When you look at soft skills and creative thinking, which, one could ask, that's a strange thing for a parole officer or a sales rep, a box sales rep to be talking about creative thinking. But I don't see it that way at all. I see it as being very much connected because of what you've understood about the environmental factors for creating a chance for creativity to come out. So talk a little bit about that, and then do you cover any lessons from that in the book?
So the chapter's title is I'm No Van Gogh, and that's the creativity section, because when you hear of creative, to me, the first thing I heard was the cosmetic creativity, painting, writing, drawing, someone who can creatively create something, right? And Rick, he could produce a fantastic album, right? I couldn't do those things. That's not the creative angle I went for. If you look up creativity and soft skills, which is one of the foremost soft skills being sought right now by recruiters and by companies, they're looking for creativity in problem solving. My creativity was in authenticity to your character, because too many salespeople read a book, take a seminar, and they get told by Hermosi or Cynic or somebody else, hey, when they zig, zag like this. And what that ends up doing is you already take a pressure situation where your sale is dependent on your behavior and your interaction. And now you're thinking about how Hermosi has taught you how to do something. My different approach was be your goddamn self and be creative in the sense of this. If you pick up every phone call and say, hi, Jessica, this is Jason Sullivan from XYZ company. Could I talk to you today? That's what everybody does. When I talk about creativity in my chapter, it's find a way to do something different. Write your email, your LinkedIn message different, a different subject line, a different beginning. Leave a voicemail different. Say something, start something different. Be different. I heard a quote once, I don't know if you've ever heard this. Being different is better than being better.
Being different is better than being better?
Yes.
Is that what it said? That's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I jumped on that, and that's where I focused for creativity. Slightly different from Rick's, definitely different from the creativity and the soft skills that you'll find when you're looking into it for business and soft skills right now. They're diving in because they want creative problem solvers. That doesn't mean you can't be. But my thing is, if you're going to be in sales and if you're going to have a good, fresh marriage or friendship or relationship, be different from time to time. Don't wake up and say the same thing every morning to your wife. Don't greet her the same way every time she comes home from work, or every meal. Don't say thank you the same way. Mix it up, right? And we all kind of know this, but I wrote it from the stance of this is what pings our limbics and this is what stimulates us. And we make our decisions based on emotion. Most people don't understand that, right?
Can you give me an example?
We make our decisions on emotions. I'm sorry.
Can you give us an example of where you might have applied creativity, creative thinking in cooking or painting or drawing or dreaming up a sales close that you were working on that maybe came to you from, that other place, that subconscious level, subdermal place that was not a linear solution to a problem, but in fact an exponentially better and more creative solution to a problem, which speaks to that creative process itself.
What while I was doing the book, my closest friend, who also works in sales for packaging, had a massive presentation to a bunch of berry growers in California, up in the Central Valley. And he had never sold packaging to anybody in berries. And he was going through the presentation, and what I cooked up with him and for him was this. As he was doing the presentation with me, the PowerPoint, I said, I want you to put a complete blank PowerPoint slide. And he had to do this in front of 11 people, and it was a massive presentation. And I said, when you get to this slide, here's what I want you to do. I want you to transition in before you forward it. And I want you to say, as you turn it, I want you to say, this is my history in packaging for agriculture.
Wow.
And it's going to be a blank slide.
And it's
right?
It's nothing. It's just a white screen.
It's white. And I said, and what I want you to speak to is this. Look at that crowd and take it head on. Say, I can't dance around the fact I haven't sold packaging to agriculture. This is my history in selling to your industry. However, and advance the slide. And on the next slide, these are the reasons that it's a benefit to you.
Right.
And when he clicks the slide,
the reasons that he has no experience are the benefit?
The benefits are, I have no bad habits. I have no bad habits in your industry.
Wow.
I have no bad habits, right? But what I do have, bullet point number 2, is I have 20 years of packaging experience in 11 other different industries that I'll be bringing to you, whereas your current vendors have only ever known berry packaging.
So they're missing out on the benefits of the cross-pollination of best practices from other industries.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's
so
great.
Did
he get the business? Did he get the deal?
He did not. He did not.
Now, what did he learn from the process of applying some creative aspects of it, though? Did he feel a sense of authenticity in his presentation, which gave him confidence that you can't get any other way?
Well, I'm glad you asked. He didn't get liftoff on the presentation. It got clipped on the 5-yard line. Okay, it got clipped on the 5-yard line. But you just said the magic word. When he and I were developing it, and he was asking me because I teach exceptional presentations. It's part of what I consult. And when he reached out and we built it out, he was so confident. He's already a tremendously confident individual, but he went from a 9 to a 14 on a scale of 1 to 10. When we finished that, and he was so pumped, and it would kill me that he didn't get it because it was a game changer, a zip code changer, right, for him. But it was, and that's an example. And when I talk about creativity, that's where I focus on, because again, I'm a firm believer that people coming out of college or anybody going into sales, that they have maybe not the best mentor, or maybe they're trying to, you have so many TikTok videos and there's so many sales pros on there telling you how to do it. It's mind-boggling. You're guessing, am I doing this right? Do I know what the hell I'm doing at all? And it made me, and this is a lot of the reason that I got excited about the book. I said, I don't want to challenge any of these people. They're smarter. They've made more money than I ever have. But you know what? I want to speak to the audience. I want to speak to the guy or gal who wants to get into sales. And I want to say, be yourself, because you can never go wrong. You're going to appeal to people just by the very nature of your authenticity.
That's right.
Well,
right?
I love, there's such being a salesperson myself. I consider myself a bit of a salesperson, and being married to a professional salesperson. Well, thank you. I think a good salesperson can do both, purchasing and sales.
I think that's true.
You're doing them all the time.
Yes. We've read lots of books on behavioral psychology, and one of our favorite authors, obviously, is Daniel Pink, and his book, To Sell is Human, is one of our favorites. And just getting over that stigma that the salesperson is this black swan stuck in, the ugly duckling of the career field, and yet coming to the full acceptance that everyone is in sales, because to sell is human. If you've asked your wife on a date, you're in sales. If you've
got your mom to make you a cheese sandwich, you're in sales.
So I really love how you have, you've transformed through the disdain for being in sales to now fully embracing it, making it authentic. I love your message about what you're saying about, be uniquely you, take your unique persona, and then let's go and let's set the world on fire, because we need both. We need all of it. We need engineers, we need sales, we need technical, we need creative, and that's what makes this amazing amalgamation of life worth living. In the next kind of like 15 minutes as we wind down the podcast, Jason, I know you said that you weren't very active yet on social media, but are you promoting? Are you putting YouTube videos
how can people
out there?
Find you on the different platforms?
Because I'm going to watch this one over and over again. This is great. You should keep doing this. Good job.
By the way, that means a lot to me. And I had said to Jeff when we were on our first 2-hour date on the phone call, I said, again, I'm not. The short answer is I'm not, but I'm starting to. I'm an older dad. I only have 2, but they're 12 and 10. They're my pride and joy. And I have to go get that next job, as I'm between jobs right now, for medical benefits. But I am going to take my college try and make this book into my business. And it's been a passion of mine. I do professional sales training. I'm going to take the book and use it for an 8 and a 16-hour on-site sales training, because it applies to not just salespeople. It could be C-suite. It could be middle management. It could be anybody. It could be HR. It's basically
look at what's happening in the personal growth industry right now. It's exploding. It's not growing at 5 or 10 or 15 or 20%. It's growing at 30 and 40% per year. Online courses are going from tens of millions of dollars to tens of billions of dollars of sales in the world. And it allows people to leverage software code based on the platforms, labor based on other people's filming and editing skills, capital based on the fact that you're already using a cell phone and you've already got the cell phone capital from AT&T or Verizon. And then content creation, which is taking intellectual property and putting it in, and it's solving a gap that's been created from this work from home, live at home, have your whole universe be inside your own four walls lifestyle that people have. And it's very clear to me that through podcasts exploding and blogs exploding and blog platforms like Medium and TikTok and Twitter continuing to meet the needs of people connecting with other people on from a remote standpoint, that there's a hunger out there for people to be told, hey, what you're doing, it's okay. And it can be done it can be done differently. It can be done at a better level or a higher level. And we'll show you how to do those things, but you're okay. Whatever you're doing, it's okay. You're going to be okay. And to have a voice that you can reach out across technical medium, you don't have to know how the packets get from one router to the next across the internet in order to have a podcast and do a voice. I didn't know what we didn't know. I mean, I pushed back on having a podcast for probably 10 years, but I just got sick and tired of people saying, man, you know a lot of really good stuff and you're good at talking. You should have a podcast. Why don't you have a podcast? You ever thought about having a podcast? You should be a podcast. You have a podcast. Well, radio voice.
You have a radio voice.
You have a radio voice, right? And you do that enough times, and then you start getting mad about like, well, everybody's telling me I should be doing this thing that don't even know me. What am I afraid of? I got to figure it out. What were you going to say, Jason?
I was going to say, and if you close your eyes while I'm listening to you, you have a voice as if someone who's making a movie trailer. You have that commercialized voice, which is a calming, professional assurance that the things that are coming out of your mouth are matter of factual with passion. And what people, and you know this, Jess, because obviously you're married to him and you've probably heard his voice more than you've wanted to on occasion, I would imagine. But I digress. But I will tell you this, people forget that in communication, all forms sent and received, up as much as 30% of that is just the vocal quality, how you talk, right? So you'd heard that. And when we were talking, I'd heard that also, because the reality is this, there's very little, if anything, I can say about soft skills, honestly, that hasn't been said. It just hasn't been said the way I say it, right?
Well, yeah. And I would say be careful even in that, because when we understand that the art that we create is the point of view.
Yes.
Your point of view is the uniqueness to the thing. And so, you know, I don't necessarily know that I'm going to start singing Adele songs and posting YouTube videos on it, but I certainly could. And nobody would be able to sing Adele songs like me, whether that's pleasant for the listener or not. The fact is that nobody sounds like Jeff Heilman, and nobody sounds like Jason Sullivan, and nobody sounds like Jessica Heilman or Andrew Heilman or any of the other Heilman kids for that matter. And once we start to understand, wait a minute, the uniqueness that I see and appreciate in the art that somebody else creates is literally intrinsically embedded in who I am as a human being and in the point of view that I have that is unique in and of itself. So anything that you create is potentially art. And it doesn't mean that somebody else has to like it. In fact, most people will not like your art. In fact, 99.9% of the people won't like your art. Good thing there's 8 billion people on this planet, because 0.1% of 8 billion people is still a lot of flipping people out there that could potentially like your art. And so if you look at what's actually required in order to make money online or in order to have a business or whatever, what it really takes is the scale that comes from a handful of people who can connect with your unique point of view and say, I like that point of view. It's an interesting point of view to me. I appreciate it. I'm excited about it. And actually, that person is so authentic in that point of view that it makes me want to take this point of view and send it to somebody else. And that referral of, hey, look at this thing is actually really cool. That's where we start building a tribe and start getting an interaction with the audience. And when you recognize that the space in between the content that you're creating and the audience's reaction and participation is that breathing room that allows the art to take place, like when you're decanting a bottle of wine, right? It's the decanting of that art with your audience participation, the feedback that you get, and less about catering. Right. And the creative act, see, in sales, it's all about the customer. It's about customer obsession. All you have to do is talk to Jeff Bezos. But if you're competing for business, then you're locked into this box that says, I have to compete, which means I've got to be obsessed about the customer. But if you're actually able to transcend that box and be obsessed about the artistry that you're creating, the blank slide that you're showing, right? To me, that is the level of presentation that moves us out of upper class into world-class performers like your Tiger Woods and your Serena Williams.
Yep. Jess, you had mentioned, how did I get here to this? And I think I look back and I thank my mom and my dad when he was around. I always looked out for people. I always wanted to help people that were weaker than I was, that couldn't run as fast or didn't do as well. Anytime, my whole life, as far back, and I thank my mom and my dad for that. And I went into law enforcement to be a protector. Right. I consider myself, I don't like bullies. I look out for people out there. If someone's getting pushed around, I'll insert myself even as an old man at the expense of, personal safety, because I just don't like it. But I saw, and I'm embarrassed, I got onto TikTok about a year ago, and I'm late to the party like I am for everything, but I saw all these guys and gals hitting you with that 30-second clip, and nobody was coming from this point of view. I want you to be yourself and know it's okay, and you can still be successful. Right. And I always have that. It's that teacher, coaching, mentor, and you have this. I know you have this in you. You guys are like this. You want to help people, and you get a high. You get that feeling of when you see someone elevate from what you've done. There's such a great feeling about that because you know they've taken it in. And I want sales. And I don't know if we talked about this, but remember that 1%er thing we were talking about? You hear that 1% of wealth. So I don't know the actual data here, but you check me on this if you want to know it. I think the majority of the 1% block are sales people in the United States. I had heard the number was $200,000 a year.
Yeah, I've heard similar things to where their title may not necessarily be sales, but sales is what they do. Right.
Exactly.
If you look at David Geffen,
exactly right.
David Geffen is the greatest, by dollar volume. David Geffen
Correct.
is the single greatest record producer of all time. And all he does is sell all day, every single day.
And here's the deal. If the majority are salespeople and we're all selling, you don't need to go to college. You don't need to go to university to be a good salesperson. You need to have good soft skills and interpersonal relationship building skills. And just be yourself. And that's really why I wrote the book.
I think your book is really tip of the iceberg at this point, Jason. I think it's just the very beginning of it. And I would say, I think sometimes people have a resistance to buying books. I'm here to tell you, you should buy books. We have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of books in our library. I think you should buy Jason's book. And you could say, well, how could you say that? Because you don't know. Because the time and effort invested, tens of thousands of hours of experience, thousands of hours of writing, available for $5 or $10 in a format that you can literally take and put into a reference library, even if you don't read it. I've got thousands and thousands of books in my library I will never read, but they're available as my tastes and needs and education changes. And so having a library is not about necessarily reading all the books in your library. It's about having access to resources as you change as a person over time to say, this might be interesting to me. I have a book that's sitting on my list. It's about the history of the pencil. I've never read it, but it's sitting on my book, and I'm thinking, if I ever doubled down on education or needed to do master's degree, student level research on stuff, I would have access to this book on the history of the pencil. And so, but if we say we live a life of sound bites in the media business, and so if you could give me 3 smart things about your experience in the applied knowledge of soft skills based on your book, give us 3 smart things if you can, as takeaways for today.
Well, one would be to be yourself and not try to emulate somebody else. Don't memorize lines in sales. When you try to memorize, you fumble. And when you memorize to perfection, unless you're a really good actor or actress, they don't generally translate well in conversation. I guess that would be number 1, right? Number 2 would be to always, always follow up with people. Okay. No news is absolutely bad news. Okay. This is a deficiency for most sales reps, right? They think because they don't have the information that their customer needs or has requested at the time, that they'll just wait another 2, 4, 6 hours or 3 days. And what they fail to understand is that doesn't help the person on the other end of the line. And if for no other reason, just let them know you're there on your mind, right? And I think number 3 would be this. Stand behind what you sell, your product or service, and be willing to take a loss, and apologies cost nothing. Okay. And too many salespeople just say, I'm really sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Heilman, that didn't work. And thank you for your business, rather than stop and go, I'd like to offer you this. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking, but it has to be some financial sacrifice. Okay. That's what comes to mind on the spot. Hashtag Ticonderoga, I guess, on the pencil book. I have to go back, but I do want to end with this. I would have been remiss if I didn't say this. I wrote the book, guys. There's a lot of profanity in it because I wrote the book very conversationally.
Sure.
And I wrote the book as if we were sitting across having a bottle of wine or sharing a 6-pack, and really just me talking to you and throwing in a few, what I consider pretty good stories, interesting sales stories. And I've had some trials and tribulations because I, quote unquote, went for it in a lot of high pressure situations. And that's really, the book is anything but boring and salesy, right?
That's awesome.
So,
and we would definitely, we're excited to get our copies, and we are going to be requesting them to be signed, by the way, Jason.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
you just
If
got to
you
let
can
us
read
know.
my
That's
writing.
right.
Hey,
Yes.
Are you, what form of social, we can put social media links in the links here, but if you had a single takeaway to the youth of America out there who think that it's all about accounting, it's all about science, technology, and engineering and math, and that is what the test scores and the real estate prices are all based around, those gradings. If you were to come at that from a 90-degree angle and make a petition for the consideration of soft skills, what would that be?
Make sure you understand empathy and listen more.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thanks.
And that's a lot, Jeff. That's a lot to throw on me right there because it scrambles me. But
Well, and I wasn't trying to put you on the spot in a negative way at all. I think that
no.
There's a lot of metadata that's in your head that this
Yes.
content creation process is a creative process in and of itself. And sometimes if you sing in the dark, sometimes if you sing upside down, sometimes if you write music left-handed, sometimes if you use a red pen instead of a black pen, anything that you can do to try to shift and change the environment, it tends to stretch and solidify the aperture on how we look at problems. So I think that was a great answer. And I would say that amazingly, if there's one thing that I could tell people getting a master's degree on would probably make them wealthy in life, it's empathy. It would be empathy. 100%, because it's the ability to interact and understand the other person and where they're coming from, and using creative imagination to, when you say puts yourself in somebody else's shoes, like I'm literally imagining the lighting that you're sitting in, having a baseball cap on, having a beard, because I shaved this morning, so having a beard, right? Being in your desk, I'm seeing the way that your camera reacts to different distances that you're at, and what that would be like. And if you can do those things, and I'm imagining if my left foot had a partial paralysis to it, and how would I, what goes on in my nervous system, the panic of like, what am I going to do if I can't walk around and this is my career? Like I'm trying to stretch out with my emotions to understand what it could possibly be like to be in your situation. And then from that point of view, and then I ask you, okay, you've been you forever. I've been you for 10 minutes. How can I be a better version of myself with what you've learned by being you, now that I can have some sense of relativity to where you are?
When you can do that, that's what you call world-class emotional intelligence. When you have the ability to go, I'm going to pause. And it's important to note, and I say this in the book, empathy isn't only when it's calm and convenient. We have to exercise empathy under the most stressful of situations, when we are losing our shit, right? And we are so mad at somebody who's standing across from us, right? And we want to get into their shit and go, get your head out of your ass, right? But we don't, because we stop and we do all the things you just said in 10 minutes, right? We put ourselves in their shoes under stressful situations. That's the true person who can exercise empathy, because we can all do it when we sit back and we see a story on the news about how Palestinian children, right, could be dying, and we think of the horror, and we put ourselves through those motions of their parents, right? Or the Israelis who
you can put yourself in
unknowingly.
You can put yourself in both people's shoes.
Absolutely.
Right? I can put myself in the shoes of somebody who's Palestinian living in Gaza. I'm not taking up arms. I'm not attacking anybody, but my kid just got
Correct.
kidnapped. And now, that's horrible. It's horrible for anybody to go through that. And again, I'm not making a political statement here. I'm making a statement on the humanity aspect of empathy and how if you put yourself in the Israeli shoes, or if you put yourself in the Hamas's shoes or the Palestinian shoes, you put yourself in the executive leadership, even Biden, right? Put yourself in Biden's shoes. What's he going to do about it? Right? What would that be to have the weight of the world sitting on you, knowing you have power, you have money, you have military, and how are you going to respond to that? How are you going to respond to what's going on in the Ukraine? I think as we do that, it makes us better people because it gives us a chance to go, whoa, I've never walked a mile in the shoes of the president of the United States or in somebody living in Israel under attack. And, I think the gratefulness is kind of the natural yield from that. So,
well, I am certainly grateful. I was going to say, in order to exercise our empathy, we've asked our listeners for an hour to be empathetic. And if you are listening and you loved the Jeff Heilman Project today, and you would love to have, we would love to ask Jason to come back and just, feel free to leave comments, share, reach out to us. We will make sure to put Jason's contact information on the post. It's been so good to have you, and thank you so much for sharing.
I'm sorry, guys, for being long.
Fantastic.
No, you were great.
Because this is about bringing the humanities to people.
Absolutely.
And you're living an empathetic life as a human being, doing stuff that, when was the last time you talked to a box salesman?
Yeah.
I don't even know, right? And you've written a book and you've done all these amazing things. So folks, check out the book, Feather Sharpens Iron, available. Do we know when does it come out?
It should be out the week before Black Friday.
Week before Black Friday. And are you going to make it available on Amazon and or where books are sold?
Yeah, it's going to be on Amazon. It'll be on Kindle, I think, and Amazon for an ebook as well.
Okay.
And I just want to say thanks, Jess and Jeff, from the bottom of my heart. This is so meaningful to me, to the listeners, if you stayed around this long. And
fantastic.
Andrew, not seen, not often heard, but loved. I just want you to know
everybody
that.
loves
Thank
Andrew.
You so much.
He's great.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jeff. And have an awesome rest of your evening. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
You got it. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.